So for the most part, we have our database set up, which is super cool. There's a few things I do want to add though, and those are going to be attributes associated with each option. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can see if we're in the category, we have a create new attribute. And what happens when we click that? Well, let's just give it another attribute, and we want to associate an image with each of these properties. So let's do that. Let's type in image, and we'll come and select image and create. Now you can see if we come to modify attributes, we can have a lakefront and an image associated with it. So that's awesome. And the other thing we want to do it with is our property type. So let's come to property type, create a new attribute, and we'll also assign an image to each property type. So we'll select image, create, and then I'm going to upload all of the images associated. I'll provide those for you as well, but I'm going to go through and upload these images real quick and modify attributes, and I'll be right back. Great, so we've uploaded all of the images to our options. Let's go see what that looks like. You can see the images in here. So we modify attribute. You can see all the images associated with the attributes. So now that that's set up, you're going to see why we did that a little bit later on. But for now, let's get into the design. So we're in our design. And what's the first thing we kind of want to think about doing? Well, if we come to Airbnb, you can see that the first thing on Airbnb's website is the navigation bar. So maybe that's where we should start. Let's start by building the nav bar, and then we can add all of these categories, which is why we just added those images so we can display those later. And then we can move on from here. These are some pretty cool houses. But let's go into our bubble application. So let's add a reusable element. Let's come up to our pages, select the drop down, and we'll add a new reusable element. We'll call this nav bar, and we'll just create. So you can see it has this like pre-built small square, and we want to make that a lot bigger. So let's come to our edit. Let's go to our layout, and let's give it a, let's see, like 950 to 100. Okay, that looks a lot better, and it looks like a nav bar width and length. The next thing we're going to want to do is think about the elements inside. Again, remember, positioning matters at the parent level to where all of the children elements are going to be positioned. In this case, we do want a row because they're going to be probably in a row format. Let's select row. For now, we'll leave the container alignment as is, but we're going to come back and fix that in a little bit. First thing we're going to do is add that Airbnb logo. Again, when you're doing this, please follow along, have Airbnb's website pulled up, and do this with me. Let's drag an image across on our group. So let's add an image to our image box here. We'll go to edit. We're just going to insert a dynamic image link, and I'll be providing these for you as well. So don't worry about that. You can just grab any Airbnb logo if you'd like and put it in there. Now let's resize it. Well, we don't want it top left, and we also want to keep in mind responsiveness. Although in the nav bar, it's not going to play a huge role right now, but just keep that in the back of your mind when we're doing our sizing as far as percents go. But we'll make this a fixed width of, let's say, 150. That looks a lot better. We also want to make this a ratio. So let's do a 3:1, see what that looks like. Great, that looks a lot better. See, it kind of almost looks like the same size as their logo they have here, except on our application. And we want to move this down a bit so it's in the center. So come to vertical alignment, select your centered option. You can see it's almost right where we want it. Now let's add that centerpiece or the search bar that you would see here. So let's add that. Let's go grab a group. We'll drag it on like this. And this is where I actually want to fix the rows alignment. We're also going to want to vertically center, so we'll do that. But we're going to have 3 elements across. So you see here, we'll also have this Airbnb or home and these little icons over here. So let's drag another group across, and we'll just put it right over here. Don't know how big it's going to be yet, but let's just do that for now, and we'll vertically align it to the center. And now we can play with our row alignment. So we do have row, but we don't really want it to be left aligned. We want it to be spaced apart, taking up as much space as possible. So you can see they all snap in the exact place we'd want them. It's a little bit off the left, a little bit off the right, and equal space in between each of the elements. Now, it's important to note when we're doing this application, we are going to be following proper naming conventions. So we don't want group A because we're going to have a zillion groups, and we're not going to remember them by what letter they are. So let's go ahead and label this group, and we'll call it search bar. And that way we know, okay, we're working with the search bar group and everything inside of that. That's going to help us out a ton. I promise if you just leave, even in fact, let's change image A to, let's do logo. So image, logo. And that way we know what it is because we're going to have no idea later, I promise you, when we have a bunch of stuff going on. Great. So we have that search bar, and let's start designing it a little bit. You notice there's kind of the circular corners here along with a little highlight and looks like a box shadow underneath because it looks like it's lifting off the page a little bit. So let's try to replicate that and give it that same effect in our application. First thing we'll do is change it to row. We're going to need it to be a row. For now, we'll just leave the container alignment the same. Let's go to appearance. Let's actually detach our style. So let's detach style, and then let's see if we can't replicate that shadow. So we'll come down to shadow style. Right now it's none, but we want outset. Then it has 2240A. We can actually leave that just how it is. It almost looks the same as they have over here, maybe a bit darker, but that's great for our purposes. The other thing we want to do is give this 100 roundness, and that's going to make it so we can see the circular edges, almost like you see over in Airbnb. So it looks already a lot like their search bar, and you can see that just with a few style changes, how much better it looks than just a box. Now, inside the search bar, we're going to have 2 more groups and then put elements inside of those, and I'll show you why here in a second. Let's drag a group inside, just like so, and then we're going to have another group. So come grab a group, put it right next to that one. Now we have 2 groups. Let's put it inside. 2 groups inside of that search bar. Now it looks like it's bleeding off the page a little bit. We don't want that. Let's come to our layout and let's move it over just a bit. Let's give it a 10 pixel left and let's give it that center alignment. Great. That's kind of where we want it placed. Again, you can see it's inside of its parent. Along with this, let's do the same. Let's center align. Then you can see they're right next to each other. And the reason for this, if we come back to Airbnb, you can see that we need this icon to be right next to these text fields, but we need it in a row, and we want to give these different alignments. So I can already tell this search bar is going to be a little small, so let's fix the sizing of this. Let's come to the group. We'll go to edit. You can see right now it's a fixed width. Let's actually change that. Let's uncheck, make this a fixed width. You can see it takes up a bunch more space, but let's give it a 0 minimum and then say a 400 pixel max width. So we don't want it to get really any larger than that. And we'll keep that as is. We'll get rid of that minimum height and we'll just leave it blank, so 0. Then let's come down to our margin and let's give all of the margins like a 20 pixel distance, just so we have some space in our search bar and it separates from the page a little bit, depending on how large it's going to be. Great, so the next thing we want to do is rename our group C, group, search bar, placeholder. Great, so now we know that that's going to be our search bar placeholders, and this bigger group is going to be our search bar. Now let's change the layout of it a little bit. So right now it's fixed. We want it to be, of course, row. And now we have the row options available to us, and what we're going to want to do is uncheck this make element fixed width, and we'll just give this a 0 min and a 0 min on the height as well. And let's check collapse when hidden. And there'll be a reason for that later because we're going to be hiding and showing various components as we build. But just make sure you check collapse when hidden. So now let's add our text boxes. So we have our text. Let's go in and add these really quick. So we have edit me. Let's change its appearance to say anywhere, like so. And then let's change the styling a bit. So right now it's 14 pixels. Let's make it a bit bigger at 16. Then let's bold it and we'll make it a black text instead of whatever color it defaults to. And then let's come to layout. We want to make sure it's centered. So let's do that. Let's center it. Now for this, we want it to be a fixed width for now, but we're going to come back and change that in a sec. And I'll tell you why. If we uncheck it right now, it makes it harder to place other elements because it takes up the full width. So let's leave that checked for now. Let's add the other text boxes. So let's do a copy paste. And now we can just change this to any week. So any week, I want to make sure that's exactly what it is. Yep. And then we have one more field, and you can see we're kind of already running out of space. So let's copy paste again. We'll paste right there. So you can see it lapped below, and we don't want that to happen. We want it to be on the same line. Let's change a few things and see if we can't correct this. Let's click on a text box. We'll edit. And let's go to layout. Right now it's a fixed width. Let's uncheck that. Let's give it a 0 min. And then let's fit width to content. Okay, that takes up some space. So let's do the same over here. We'll take it 0 pixels. You can see it snapped on the same line. Let's make a fit width to content. Let's do the same over here. Uncheck, 0 pixels, and fit width to content. Now you can see they're all right next to each other, and that's not ideal. The reason being is because we have an aligned to left parent, so they're all cramming over to the left. We want the space between. And now you can see the space is even between them, and they snapped in the proper positions. Now let's see if that doesn't match their designs. So we come back over here, you can see this is a little bit less black, so we can go ahead and unbold it. Let's go to appearance. Just click unbold. And now let's change it to a bit of a gray color. It doesn't have to be exact, but somewhere right there, that looks about right. And it actually says add guests. Let's change that from any week to add guests. Great. Now, of course, we can go into granular detail and add these little lines. We're going to skip over some of the nuanced stuff that just takes up time and keep moving forward. But I'll touch on it really quickly. If you did want to do something like that, you would just add a left border. So you'd edit, come down here, select your border, and then instead of the border all around it, you would just select border left, and you could do that in the attributes. But we're going to skip some of those nuanced things just to save time. Let's continue on, and let's add this search button over here, see if we can't get it to look like Airbnb's. So we're going to need a red circle with an icon in the middle. So you see we made this group D. We're actually going to call this group and search button. We'll do search dash button. Great, so we know what that is. Now let's make the group red. So come here, we'll come to appearance. And right now it has no background style. Let's give it a flat color. We'll give it this red color. So we have the color, and this kind of matches that same color. I had to play around with that for a little bit. But let's now make this a circle instead of a square. And how do we do that? Let's come down to our roundness. Right now it's 0. Remember, when we change our roundness, that's the borders that are being rounded out based on the number we give. So if we give 100, see, it's almost a circle. Now, what's preventing it from being an exact circle? Well, it's just not the right size. So let's change the size. So let's go to layout. Now in layout, you see it's fixed. Of course, let's not do that. Let's do at least align to parent or row. And that gives us the ability to change the width and height. So let's do that. Let's do 40, and we'll do 40. So now you can see that it is a circle, but it still doesn't look exactly right. The circle's touching the edges, and it doesn't look like on Airbnb it's doing that. So let's try to fix that. Let's give some margin and see what happens. Let's give a 10 pixel margin around the entire group. And then you can see that the search bar adjusted size to fit that new margin that we gave this group. And the reason being is because of the formatting and layout that we gave it previously to be more dynamic and fit to width and fit the content that is inside. So that's awesome. It looks a lot better. Now we just need to add an icon, and we should be good to go on our search. So let's do that. Let's add an icon. Let's see if we can drag it right in the group here. And it's super small. We probably want to make that a little bigger. We'll see what the icon looks like. But let's select a search icon. So just come to your icons. We'll select a search one. Right now, we'll just change it to white. See, it's pretty small. I'd say let's make that a little bit bigger. Let's come to layout. And let's do 30 by 30 maybe. See what that looks like. Okay, yeah, that looks a lot better. It looks almost exactly like their icon they have here. Honestly, theirs is even a little small, but I do like the bigger icon. Great, so that looks a lot better. It's already starting to look a ton better just with our few basic designs we've implemented. Let's change our account icons over here. So let's name this, so group account menu, something like that, something that you can identify these account menu icons, whatever you want to call them. They're going to be icons that navigate our menu, so account menu. Let's work with that, and let's input our icons we need over here. Let's come back to our icons, and we're going to have just 2 icons. So let's drag them in. Of 1. We'll just copy and paste that over. So we have 2. And of course, let's give our parent group a row layout. So come here. We'll select row, and then we're going to want to center them or space between. And then we'll center each one vertically. And that's kind of, get used to doing that because you're going to be doing that a lot of times with the children component inside those row parent components, just so they look nice and pretty and take up the space we need. Now again, here they're spread out a little bit. We don't want them taking up that much space. We just want this parent group to barely take up the space so it fits these elements. So let's fix that. Let's edit. Let's come to our make this element fixed width. Let's uncheck that, and then we'll select fit width to content. And now let's change the min width. So instead of 218, we'll give it 0. Then you can see it snaps to exactly the size of these icons, and that's really exactly what we want. So now everything's laid out properly. Let's change the icon. Let's see what they have. So they have the bars. Awesome. So we already have that. Let's give it the gray, just like so. So let's see what they have close to the person icon. If we scroll all the way down, you can see we have a little profile icon. That looks about the same. Let's give it a different color. What do they have? It's about the same gray. Let's stick with this gray color. Copy and paste that over here. Great. So our navbar, nav menu, whatever you want to call it, looks great. It looks way better than we originally had it. And that was just with a little bit of styling. Looks almost exactly like our Airbnb page over here. So that's pretty much all for our navbar. Just the basic setup, but we are going to do a ton more functionality when it comes to this navigation bar, because right now it's just design. But let's leave it how it is, and I want to move on to our main web page or the landing page, which will include these categories and everything listed below. So let's get into the next lesson and do just that.